If anything, having a kid really makes you decide if all of this stuff is important or not important.
Welcome to Artists and Offices, a podcast that explores, through interviews with working artists, the idea that the work you do for pay supports the work you do for love. I'm your host, Rebecca Bird-Grigsby, visual artist, mom of two, and full-time project manager by day. In 2017, I left my day job at the time and spent 2 years rebooting my studio practice while navigating the uncertain terrain between day jobs and creative work. In season 1, each episode offered a conversation with an artist balancing their day job with their art practice. This season, I'm stepping outside of the office to talk with artists who are also parents, creative people at different stages of their careers and caregiving about what it really takes to make art while raising kids. On this episode, I'm thrilled to welcome Lisa Solomon to the podcast. Lisa is a studio artist, college professor, and illustrator whose work explores themes of domesticity, craft, and personal history, often blurring the lines between art and craft through her mixed media pieces and large installations. She's exhibited nationally and internationally with work in both private and public collections, and she's also the author of several books, including A Field Guide to Color, The Color Meditation Deck, Knot Thread Stitch, and more. Beyond her art practice, Lisa teaches on Creative Bug and continues to create from her backyard studio in Oakland, where she lives with her husband, their teenager, 2 cats, a 3-legged pit bull, a dachshund mix, and countless spools of thread. Lisa Solomon, welcome to Artists and Offices. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on this season. So I'm going to jump right into my questions. And this being a podcast, obviously the focus this season is on caregiver artists, parent artists, but this, being a podcast in part still about the work artists do for pay. I wanted to start by asking you about what you wanted to be when you were little. I understand that at one point you wanted to be a banker because of how the tellers stamped things at that time, which is really adorable. And I don't know how much stamping is still involved in that line of work. But what are some other things you wanted to be when you were growing up?
That's hilarious. Yes, I did. I just liked watching them stamp things. I thought it was really fun. Yeah, I don't think they stamp anything anymore. And no, I have no interest in being a banker now. I hate thinking about money and what to do with it. Let's see, what else did I want to be? For like a hot minute, I wanted to be a news anchor.
Okay. Uh-huh.
I think that's partially from growing up in LA and just being surrounded by like movie TV culture. And so I thought, news anchor would be fun. I can't remember what else I really wanted to be when I was little, but artist was not on the list.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so and a little bit, you've been interviewed a lot, like in print and in other podcasts. But a little bit about your bio to start. So I understand you were born in Tucson, Arizona.
Yep.
You mostly grew up in LA though, and then you moved with your family to Santa Barbara for high school. You kept coming up north to the San Francisco Bay Area for college, and you stayed on for grad school. And of course, you live and work in Oakland now. So I'm curious, what drew you to the Bay Area? Was it, UC Berkeley's art practice department specifically, or something else? And did you know you wanted to major in art when you applied?
I had an inkling that I wanted to major in art when I applied. I only applied to like UC schools, CCA, and Carnegie Mellon. Those are the only places I applied to college. And art was in the back of my mind, but I had no idea what that meant or like the feasibility of it at all. My father went to UC Berkeley, so that was part of why it was on my radar. And, he went in the 60s, so he talked a lot about all the political stuff that was happening on campus, which of course I thought was super interesting. Only to arrive and find out Berkeley's probably one of the oddly most conservative places in a weird way. But anyways, that's a whole other story. So we came to do a campus tour, and it was the middle of summer. And my dad, being my dad, was like, well, let's just see, you're interested in the art department. Let's see if there's anybody in their offices. And I was like, Dad, it's summer. Like, no. And I was super embarrassed and I didn't want to do it, but he forced me to do it. And lo and behold, Catherine Sherwood was in her office.
Crazy. So you met Catherine before you even
I met Catherine, and she was really the reason why I chose Berkeley.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, so I, had to do some kind of weird portfolio thing with CCA, and I just got a weird vibe from there. Um, like I liked it. The person I talked to was great, but I didn't like like they had an agreement. I can't remember even with who it was. They had an agreement with some college and you could take classes from there, but I wanted a more rounded education. And so then going and meeting Catherine in her office, and she had a Santa Barbara connection, and she was just so engaging and personable that I immediately was like, I don't care what the rest of the department is like. I want to work with this person. So that pretty much sealed the deal for me and is why I went to Berkeley.
Wow, cool. Yeah, I knew that obviously I knew you worked with Catherine as a
Yeah.
student and and we can talk more about that later in terms of how you've stayed connected to her and others in the Bay Area creative community. But yeah, I'd never heard that story before. So that's great. So we're going to like kind of bounce around a little bit
Yeah.
timeline. After college, you had several day jobs before you went to grad school,
Yeah.
including waiting tables.
Yep.
And you said in another interview that you kind of went that route so that you'd have time. I'm assuming sort of daylight time. I think you were mostly a painter at the time, right?
Yep.
To make art. So I'm curious if you can think back to that time and reflect on like how effective that was as a strategy for, balancing work and art,
Yeah.
especially for younger listeners,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it was semi-effective. I tell my students now that time when you graduate from undergrad is the hardest probably time you'll ever have in terms of figuring out how to make work because A, you're really young and you don't necessarily have the discipline that you're going to have later on in life. B, it's way easier to do anything else than make art. It's just easier to watch a movie, to take a walk, to hang out with friends, to eat a meal. It's just so much easier to do anything but go into the studio. So I feel like in your young 20s, it's really hard. I mean, I graduated 18, 19, 20, 20. I was 22 when I graduated from Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
So I was super young and but it did kind of work. Like we had moved into an apartment that had an extra room that I was going to use into a studio. So I blanketed the floor with plastic, like I stapled it down, and I blanketed the walls with cardboard. So I stapled cardboard to the walls so that I wouldn't have a huge cleanup or mess
Oh,
or
that's cool. That's
issue.
smart. Yeah.
Yeah, with the landlord. And I stretched some canvases and I set it up. Did I work in there as much as I would work in there now? No. But did I work in there? Yes. And yes, waiting tables did make it easier because I would get home, I would be really tired, but I would stay up for a little bit and I would kind of think and maybe walk into the space and look at stuff that was going on. And then I would sleep in and then I would get up and maybe work for a little bit if I could find the motivation before I went into work for my day job. But I only waited tables for like a year and then I went to work in galleries. So I quickly shifted.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's my next question. That's a perfect segue to, yeah. So it was about a year that you said you waited tables and then you worked was it Paula Ingram? I was trying to guess.
No, I worked at Bronstein Key Gallery.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. I was like
Yeah.
trying to because I think you said first woman gallerist in San Francisco,
Yeah,
or was that?
so Ruth
Okay.
Bronstein started her
Oh,
gallery, and it wasn't in San Francisco, it was in Tiburon, and it was in 61. So she was like the
oh,
first
okay.
woman to start a gallery
In the Bay Area.
in the Bay
Gotcha.
Area.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she was a hoot to work for. So Richard Shaw showed with her, and Richard had been my teacher, and Catherine. Obviously, all my teachers knew who she was, and so they
Mm-hmm.
all kind of put a good word in for me to work with
Mm-hmm.
her. So yeah, I worked there for like 2.5 years ish.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really eye-opening experience. I'm super, super, super glad I did it. It has helped me navigate a lot of things in the arts that I think I would have had no clue about had I not worked there. And then she actually, in the dot-com era when everyone's rent was getting insane, she was at the end of her lease at 250 Sutter. And so I helped her move into a temporary space and then I quit because basically her director had also left. And so I was kind of doing 2.5 people's jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And she paid me, she gave me a raise, but it was just really stressful. And then I kind of had to train who was going to be my supervisor, like the person above me. So it just felt weird to be like, hi, I'm training you and you're kind of going to be my boss, but I'm the one that knows how everything goes. So this feels weird. So I just kind of
Yeah.
left.
It was time to move on. Yeah. And you've described that experience as kind of providing like the professional practices that didn't really exist when you were an undergrad. And so I have two questions about that. And, I've heard that from other artists as well. But first, I'm curious if your MFA experience, which I think you went back to school, was it 5 years you had in between undergrad and grad school?
Yeah, it was about 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious if your MFA experience was any different in terms of professional practices. And then my second question is, as an educator, you've been teaching for over 20 years. How would you say this has changed, I guess, kind of institutionally during that time?
Yeah. So professional practice wise, no, the MFA did not really give that much more, other than I feel like maybe the professors were a little bit more open because we were a little bit older and on a career trajectory. So they were a little bit more open about their own personal dealings with galleries and stuff. I mean, Ron Nagel and I became very close. And so he was very open with like who he was working with and how it was going and sort of what his and their expectations were. And then having worked in a gallery, I could like fill in all the gaps. Um, and then like, in terms of changing, yes, I feel like some institutions are doing a better job. So I taught the professional practice class at San Francisco State for many, many years, and it got instituted into the program via this weird writing requirement called GUAR that they had. So it wasn't ideal because I had to make the students write. I mean, I would have made them write anyways, but I had to make
Mm-hmm.
them write a little bit more because there was this writing component
Oh,
to the
interesting. Yeah.
class.
Like more than an artist statement and that
Yes.
sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I did it so that I felt like the writing was all still really good for them. Basically, I had them respond to readings and then they had to like build a website that had like a writing component on it. So, I mean, it all worked out, but it was strange because I don't think that's how I would have built the class
Mm-hmm.
if I had been able to not, I probably wouldn't have had quite as much writing
Mm-hmm.
in the course. And then they switched it many years ago to like an upper division. They have these 600 level courses that are kind of like open studio things. So they kind of switched it to that, and I stopped doing it. So I don't really know what was in them, but it was no longer a requirement, and the class, at least in my experience, it seems like it didn't have the same kind of buzz. So when I taught the professional practice class, and I don't mean this to sound like I don't want to toot my own horn, but a lot of people said that that was the most important class that they took at State, that it was super informative, and that, I mean, many, many years later, I would have students be like, I still have the reader from that class and I still refer to it, and I still have the book and I still refer to it, and I still have the notes and I refer to all of those. And so that always made me really proud because I felt like a lot of times that information is gatekept and I don't really understand why.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine because that's something that is in the first season where I just focused on kind of juggling art and work. It's a very common kind of thread. And it's something that, I mean, I went to grad school 20 years ago. So I finished, 17, 18 years ago. And it was just, I don't know how things have changed. That's what I'm always curious about. But yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that a class like that would be top of mind for those students.
Yeah. I mean, I had a reputation of being really hard. And so some people thought the class was too hard, but then even some of those students would come back like years later and be like, I'm really glad because basically it showed me that I wasn't really interested in being a professional artist.
Interesting. Yeah.
Like
yeah.
that I was more a hobbyist, and at the time it was a hard pill to swallow, but now that I'm, out of school and, working in insurance or whatever, I realize all the things we were talking about and what you were trying to prepare us for. And I appreciate it now. So that always made me feel really good too. So, I mean, anyways, that professional series does not have the same sort of response rate or talk about. And like I mean, well, I'm now quote unquote retired from SF State since they have budget cuts and I can't teach there anymore. But I had not heard people feel like they were getting the same sort of information
Hmm.
in the professional practice classes that do still exist there. So, and then I feel like, I mean, I went and talked to a professional practice class at Berkeley. I think Misako was teaching it. Somebody was teaching it, and I went and talked to them. And so I know it exists in other, or Indira, somebody was teaching it, or maybe I've
Hmm.
done it more than once. I think I've done it more than once. I think I've done to both. I think I've gone to both versions. And so I know they exist, but I don't really get a sense that they're as widespread as they should be. I still
Hmm.
feel like there's a lot of gatekeeping and nobody's really, because like I used to talk about taxes.
Yeah,
Like,
which is super helpful. Like it's something you have to know if you're going to go into kind of the business of being an artist.
and it
Yeah.
was so basic. It was one day. And I was always like, this is not enough information, but at least like this will get you started. Like you need a business license. You might want a tax accountant. You want separate bank accounts. You probably want a separate credit card, like all these things. And they, students would just look at me like, what? And it's like, yeah, you're running a business. Like this
Yeah,
is a
totally. There
business.
is this other like less sexy side of being an artist. Yeah. Especially if you're trying to make your living from,
Yeah.
from being a creative person, right?
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting too what you said about that like part of the value in teaching that is, some people may want to keep their livelihood separate from their creative practice. And that's a really valuable thing to learn, especially at a young age, right? Rather than like
Yes.
going, kind of chipping away at it maybe in a frustrating way for a decade or two before
Yeah,
you
I mean,
before
I
you figure that out.
really, really tried to hammer home that this is not like getting a law degree or becoming a doctor. It's not an A, B, C, D, do these things and then this will happen. Like nothing is guaranteed. There is no order. There's just nothing. And so I would try to show them as many different artists as I knew about. I would always have somebody come in and talk, or we would go do a studio visit. I would just try and be like, look at these 20 different paths that these
Hmm.
20 different people have taken.
Yeah,
All of them
totally.
are legitimate. Which one
Yeah.
speaks to you? I
Yeah.
don't
And
know.
totally. And I feel like that existed when I was a grad student as well. And this kind of ties into like the caregiving aspect too, like being a parent. Like I feel like there were, for the professional practices, there were examples, but it sounds like what you did in your class was pull out from those examples like some very nitty gritty, like these are this is how you run your business as an artist. And so I think there's probably still, it sounds like there's still a need for that. And then, we'll get to this a little bit more later, but the kind of examples of parent artists as well. I feel like there's even, at least when I was a grad student, very much even less than that.
Oh, when I was an undergrad and a grad student, I don't think I knew of very many parent artists at all. I mean,
Mm-mm.
Catherine was kind of the shining example.
Totally. Yeah. Well,
I went to school when she was pregnant. So it was like, oh,
yeah, so crazy.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and speaking of, so MFA programs, you went to Mills College here in
Mhm.
Oakland for grad school, and you've said in other interviews that part of your kind of impetus for going back to school was to try out teaching. And I think a lot of us that go to get MFA program, to get our MFA, go at least in part for the sort of carrot at the end of the elusive carrot at the end of that of
Yeah.
teaching.
Uh-huh.
And so I would imagine you did like the usual teaching assistant gigs there as a grad student, and then you've
Mhm.
mentioned in other interviews that Catherine,
Mhm.
who again you mentioned already is artist who was a professor at the time. I do believe she's retired, right, from UC
Mhm.
Berkeley, and
Mhm.
that's also how we met back in the
Mhm.
day.
Mhm.
She helped you get your first teaching gig in Cal's summer school program.
Mhm.
So can and so you've just talked a little bit about teaching at SF State. I guess can you talk a little bit more about your work as an educator over the years and kind of how that part of your work has evolved and changed?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely got an MFA thinking that teaching was an option. I mean, I hate to be like a downer, but I would not encourage people to do that anymore.
Same,
Um,
unfortunately.
yeah, I just think it's way too hard. There's way too many qualified people. Unless you're willing to really pick up and move to wherever, then I don't really think it's a viable option for most artists. And that makes me incredibly sad. Um, my personal experience teaching, I have always liked teaching. I mean, I taught as an undergrad class at Berkeley,
Oh, cool.
in the women's studies department,
Oh,
not
nice.
art at all.
Hmm.
I've always liked exchange of information and ideas. I've had a great time teaching. I've been very lucky. I never really had a tenured position, but I mean, I wanted one for a hot minute and then I didn't get one. And I actually think it was the best thing that happened to me. At the time, it was devastating, but now I'm like, no, it's actually really good that I didn't get it, other than
Hmm.
job security. The amount that I think you have to teach as a tenured professor is kind of insane if you want to have a practice of your own of any
Hmm.
kind.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I've really loved it. But also, if I was starting now, I would not I would not pursue that at all. I would pursue something really different. And I don't even know what that exactly would be.
Hmm.
Um, but I feel like the landscape of academia is only getting worse, not better. This is so sad. This is so
Yeah, no, I
depressing.
know. Sorry, I don't mean to take it on such a downer note, but
No,
it's
it's okay.
true. And it's kind of like the professional practices. I feel like it's not really talked about in a transparent way. I mean, I do think things have shifted over the past, I mean, I say 20 years because that's when I went to grad school, but it does seem like a lot of people in kind of the year I went. So I started in 2005, kind of went not just with like, oh, teaching is an option. Like that's what we kind of expected. Would not that it was a guarantee by any means, but it was sort of like I have my MFA. I've worked my butt off during grad school. I did TA-ships. I did like everything that I could have possibly done. And then apply, and then people are applying for year after year, even for adjunct positions. And then you get, and again, I hate to be so negative, but I mean, I guess just in the spirit of transparency about the sort of limited options, like then, I turned down a couple of adjunct roles because literally the amount of, and this ties into the parent thing, the amount of pay and commute
Yeah.
and parking and because it was split over 2 days was less than what I would pay for just for childcare on the
Yeah. I mean,
districts. That's really tough.
I mean, adjuncting has its pluses in that you aren't required to go to departmental meetings. You aren't required to do any service in the university. You don't have to advise any students. I mean, I used to love saying, sorry, I can't answer that question. It's above my pay grade. Go talk to your advisor.
And just and like really focus on the teaching, like teaching your
Focus on the
classes.
teaching, focus on, yeah, students and your own work. Like, I don't think I could have had, I don't, I couldn't have taken many of the opportunities that I've really enjoyed in my artistic practice had I had a full-time teaching job.
Hmm.
Like, it would
Totally.
have been
Yeah.
impossible. I couldn't have
Hmm.
written books had
Yeah.
I had a full-time teaching job, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
really interesting because they want you, like they want all their tenured professors, right? Like it's
Yeah. That's
always
the expectation, right? Is that,
right. And it's like books and art, like nobody writes, like, what are you talking about? And then, like, okay, I have the books, but I don't have the tenure.
right. Right. Totally.
Yeah.
Well, so pivoting from teaching a little bit, I wanted to talk about location.
Yeah.
So, because you obviously stayed for grad school and you've stayed since. So, I'm just wondering if you ever, other than applying to Carnegie Mellon as an undergrad, did you ever consider leaving the Bay Area?
I mean, considered yes, practicality, no.
Hmm.
Like
So,
before we were married, my husband and I purchased the house that we live in, that we still live in 1999. Like, so that's part of why I stayed here for grad school. Like, we already had a house. So, like, moving away for grad school wasn't really a viable option.
hmm.
In my wildest dreams, like, I'd love to live part-time somewhere and part-time here, but that's not super practical.
Yeah. Can you reflect though on like the significance of kind of staying put after both college and grad school for your career as and such a multifaceted career as an artist, educator, publisher, or author. I mean, all
For
of the many things you've done as a creative
For
person.
me, it was really vital because I made all my connections here. So, like, I mean, when I worked for Ruth Bronstein, like the artists in her stable were, on average 15 to 20 to 30 to more older than me. So I could see what their lives were like. It was really eye-opening to see all these different artists at different stages of their career doing what they wanted to do and figuring out how they were navigating it. Like, did they have a trust fund? Did they have a day job? Did they have kids? Did they have pets? Like, how did their lives work? So that was really eye-opening and made it seem possible. I really think that if I hadn't seen that many artists and that many lives, it would have been much harder to navigate my own life and figure out how to make it work. So just that life experience was incredible. And making all those connections. So not only did I make connections with other artists, many of whom I'm still friends with, some of whom helped me get other jobs in other capacities, and then meeting other gallerists and other people who are still working in the field. And not necessarily in terms of promoting my own career or helping me, but just it's always easier to ask somebody that you know for information about something that you don't know. Mm-hmm. So even if it was just like, hey, I'm really interested in this and one of your artists got this, like, can you tell me a little bit about that? And of course, just sharing a field or like standing across from one another at an art fair for, 4 days over a weekend, it just gives you an opportunity to be like, hey, how's this happening? Like, what grants are they interested in, just regular old community. Yeah. And I mean, the professors that I had were really generous and amazing. And I became friends with a lot of them, which opened doors, right? Like, I mean, being friends working for Catherine in her studio opened a lot of doors for me. So I was really lucky. And I always tell students, I don't think you should go into these opportunities with that in mind. Like, I didn't become friends with Catherine in order to get a teaching job over summer at UC Berkeley. In fact, I was shocked when she was like, hey, do you want to teach painting over summer? I was like, really? Do you think I'm qualified? She's like, you have an MMA. You're totally qualified. Right. So it wasn't like I was trying to work the room. And it was, it's always been for me just looking for authentic community. And then that community supports you in multiple ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it does seem like there are lots of advantages to kind of staying in the area where where you go to school or where you kind of start to lay down those roots in terms of like building that community and then being able to kind of tap back into it or just be part of it. But on the other hand, I guess I'm reflecting on like a lot of what you've done as a creative person, as an artist, kind of transcends the constraints of like physical location. So I know you've taught for Creative Bug, there are things like Craftcation. I know a lot of this is maybe somewhat newer, right? As things have developed, like things like Craftcation, blogs, other workshops, other like conferences and things like that. And then of course, putting your books out in the world. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about like how you balance these different ways of working and then, how the pandemic impacted things. I feel like there's this kind of like collective amnesia that's happening with the pandemic. Yeah. I think about it all the time in terms of how it impacted my life and also just the community around me. So I'm sure that had an effect on kind of how you operate as a creative person as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I started blogging in the early 2000s, like before Facebook, before like when Instagram wasn't owned by Meta, when it was chronological and it was you and all your friends.
Yeah. I'm just curious, like, how did you blog? Like, what did you?
Oh, it's still up.
Blogger? Is it?
Yeah.
No, I know. But was it Blogger around at the time?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, now I feel like everybody's moved to Substack. But yes, it was Blogger and it was constant. And every day we would check each other's blogs and we would comment. I mean, that was like the beginning of my day. Can you imagine? I have friends from that time period. That's like over 20 years ago now. Like I've seen people's children grow up because of that. Yeah. Like it was a really, and I feel bad for kids today because it'll never go back that way. I feel like an old lady. I used to walk in the snow backwards 10 miles.
Uphill, both ways.
Yeah, but it really was. Like it was super magical and it will never be the same. The internet will never be the same.
Yeah.
But at the dawn of all of this, it was incredible. And like blogs were like a filter to all these people who were doing the same things as you all across the world. I mean, I have friends in Sweden from a blog. And that really opened up the door. Like the first book that I was asked to write was because I had a blog and people were reading it. So they were like, oh, hey, you seem to be an expert on embroidery. Do you want to write a book on embroidery? And I was like,
That's so cool.
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wonder like how often that sort of thing happens these days. Like
These days,
did somebody would
I
notice
have
something you're doing
no,
online,
I mean, I think if you go viral and you have 1 million followers, then it might happen. But otherwise, I don't think it's the same at all. Yeah,
So
I don't know.
yeah, so it sounds like you were kind of like you have such a, you put down roots pretty early, like before you went to grad school, I can see so many ways that you benefit from that. But it seems like you were kind of working in this other more kind of, ephemeral, ethereal way as well from like the early days.
Yeah, I mean, almost as soon as I had an email account, right? Like I got my first email account in college and we checked email like once a week. I mean, it wasn't even like I still went to the library for research. Like, studying for art history was going to the library and going into the basement and looking at, zigzagged temporary walls of slides that could potentially be on your test. Like there was no Google image search.
No, I mean, we even before applying to grad school with a slide carousel, I remember I helped Catherine with one class, her art medicine and disability class, and I went to the slide library and put together slide carousels for her. Yeah,
yeah, I did the same thing teaching at Mills in 2001, 2, and 3, right? Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it was a totally different world. And again, I feel really lucky. Like so many of the connections I forged way back then are the things that have sustained what I think people think are like the highlights of what has happened in my creative career. And it's really it's community. Like it always goes back to community. It's like, many of the most interesting curatorial things I've done or books that I've written have all been forged in some way by someone who knew someone who suggested me for something or said, you should reach out to this person or try this. So it's all about that.
Okay, so finally getting to parenthood halfway through. But before we talk about parenthood, I did want to talk a little bit about your mother and grandmother. I know your grandmother on your father's side has been a big influence on your work. And you tell this story about how when I think you were pregnant with your daughter and your grandmother was diagnosed with cancer. Do I have that right? And she took you out to lunch one day, told you she was leaving you money to do whatever you wanted with. But, given that you were an artist at the time about to embark on parenthood, had some opinions about how you should, spend that money. So can you talk a little bit about that conversation and kind of what you did from there?
Yeah. I mean, my grandma Shirley was a huge impact on my life. It's still a huge impact on my life. She knitted and crocheted and made things with her hands all the time. I have many handmade items from her that I cherish and that mean a lot to me. And yeah, I was pregnant and she knew really before anyone to tell me that having a kid was really going to change my life and the way that I worked. And she was like, you should build this, I don't want to tell you what to do. You can go to Europe, you can buy a car, but you should build a studio in your backyard with this money, because you have the space and because you're going to have a hard time finding the time to make the work when you have a little baby. Absolutely right. I don't know if I would have heard it from anyone else the same way. Like, I think Catherine said something about having a kid, but it just didn't register the same way. There's something about before you have the kid, you like hear people and you're like, yeah. And then after you have the kid, you're like, oh shit, they were all right. Like I did not pay enough attention to what they were saying. Like there's no way to really internalize.
Yeah, totally.
Get the message until you're up at 3 a.m, feeding the baby and hungry because you're breastfeeding all the time. And you're like, oh, I have to eat a snack too. Like, what's going on? Anyways, so yeah, the studio that I'm sitting in right now is from her. And so every time I come to work, I think about her. A lot of the work that I do is because of her. The conversations that I had with her are part of the next book that I just have written that's going to get published next year. So hugely influential and important.
Yeah, I love that idea of just like there's sort of this physical presence there with the studio that, and also and I'll put links to things in the show notes. It's a pretty amazing looking studio space.
Yeah, it's not
Cool
big,
little
but
time
it's
lapse too on your
yeah,
website.
it's not
Yeah.
big, but it's big enough and it's mine. And right now it's an absolute mess because it can be. Like it's having had a studio in my house and then having a studio outside of my house. I think it's really important to have a studio wherever you can have it, even if it's your
Hmm.
kitchen table and you put stuff in a box and you put the box away and then you bring the box out and you work on your stuff at the table. But having a separate studio that 10-step walk from my back door to here makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Just in
So
terms of like, I'm here to work. I'm not thinking about the dishes. Like,
yeah.
it
So
changes your mindset.
totally. So it's separate from your home, but it's not so far that it's like, I don't want to go to the studio or yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
especially I think about my friends who live in like places that get cold in the winter. It's like, I always think it's like, I have a backyard studio as well. And it's just super, the easier, the more convenient you can make it and the
Yep.
more time you can save commuting.
Yep.
So, and then how about your mother? I know, that being Hapa is a big part of your identity. Your father is Caucasian, your mother is Japanese.
Yeah.
How else has she influenced your work? I think you mentioned in another interview that your parents moved up to the Bay Area at some point to help with the family. I would imagine that, it's interesting because in the course of these interviews, I haven't thought to ask a whole lot about like kind of support networks for just
Yeah.
basic childcare.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that's been a huge factor as
Huge.
well. Yeah.
That first book, the embroidery book, would not have been written if my parents had not moved up here. It would have been way too challenging. I mean, when I first had my kid before they moved up, I was able to afford childcare 1 day a week for like 5 hours. Like
Wow.
that was
Yeah.
the most I could do.
Mm-hmm.
I made an entire exhibition on Fridays from 9 to 2 or whatever it was that she was here. Like, talk about like no longer procrastinating. I mean, it was like this switch of like, oh my God, I have 5 hours work. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not eating lunch. I'm just working until, okay, I'll eat lunch, at 2 when they're
On the way to
their
pick up
second nap.
your daughter.
Yeah. No, the person came to my house, which was great.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, once my parents moved up here, I mean, my mom in the beginning would come once a month. She had saved up all these sick days. So she would come once a month and spend a long weekend, which was incredible. That was when I like went to the doctor and got my hair cut and did all these things that I couldn't do. That's the other thing you don't realize. Yeah. Like what you're not going to be able to do until you're like, oh, I can't. Oh, okay. But yeah, is my mom and my grandpa are the reason why I feel like I can take anything apart and do things. My mom is kind of one of those people who just does what she needs to do, like no nonsense about it. She's incredibly creative. I don't think she would call herself creative, but she really was. Like I remember when I was a kid, I would just ask her to draw things and she would just draw them. And I don't think she thinks of herself as an artist at all, but it was just kind of like draw a person with a balloon and she would draw a person with a balloon. And I think about if somebody asked me to do that, I would be like, I don't know what kind of person. Like I would have a hard time just like drawing a person with a balloon.
What kind of balloon? Like
yeah, exactly. Like a Mylar balloon, a red balloon. Like
what color is the balloon? Like what are they wearing?
Exactly. Like
where are they?
She would just do it. Mm-hmm. And she also, I mean, like I didn't really quantify this or think about it as a young person, but like my mom immigrated to a country when she was in her 20s. Like she met my dad in Japan. She spoke English, but like, can you imagine? Like, I just think about moving somewhere foreign with no friends, no family, no, like just your husband, pretty much. Like that's your support system. And like I was born in Tucson because my dad was going to grad school in Arizona, not because they chose Tucson to live in a desert, like she didn't know how to drive. She learned how to drive, like just all these things that I think about. And she never talked about any of it being a challenge or hard or scary or weird. Or, I mean, one of my first memories is going back to Japan for my grandmother's funeral. Like I was 2. She lost her mom And like she never like none of that just it never fazed her. She's very like she's got really high emotional IQ and is like really loving and compassionate and super nice and just never talks about how hard any of that was. And I
Mm-hmm.
think just as an example, that's kind of an amazing example to have as a child.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then in terms of, culturally, she never made me go to, Japanese language school. She would talk to me in Japanese. I would answer in English. She always wanted me to feel American.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's part of why I spend so much time trying to understand Japanese cultures because it feels like this missing puzzle piece that
Mm-hmm.
is super important. And every time I go back to Japan, I have this intrinsic like pull and like oh, like these are my people. They spend 7 hours looking for the perfect pen. Like I understand that they understand me, but also they aren't my people. Like I can speak the language enough to get by, but I don't look like them. I am not culturally like them. It's interesting, and so I think that trying to understand all of that has been part of like my life's work, which is weird.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Um, but yeah, trying to figure out that place, understand. And I mean, that's from her, right? I wouldn't have these experiences, this interest, this tie to a culture if it wasn't for her. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's huge.
Yeah, and I mean you've incorporated that into your work as well, and so in so many ways, right? On so many levels, in terms of like the content of your work, but also kind of straddling like one foot in kind of the art world, one foot on the more crafty side. I mean, I think some of those distinctions are
Mm-hmm.
increasingly fuzzy, but so finally getting to motherhood. So part of,
Mm-hmm.
and it's funny, you talked about kind of seeing like different artists at different stages of their career when you worked at the gallery. That's kind of part of what I'm really enjoying about working on the podcast this season, focusing on caregiving and parents and mostly mothers, is interviewing artists at different stages of both their creative careers and parenthood, right? So talking to people who have like toddlers to people who have grown kids. So,
Mm-hmm.
in addition to kind of the convenience of a backyard studio, in a 2019 interview, you mentioned like your work being like at least some of your work being portable, right? At that time, so you could get work done while hanging out with your daughter, kind of establishing a schedule that was, I'm sure like precariously balanced between like teaching 2 days, art making 2 days, seeing shows, and then, kind of keeping the weekends reserved for family. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious, because you're quite private, right? Like you have a pretty robust online presence, but there's not a lot about your family. So how old is your daughter now, if you don't mind sharing? And can you just, this is a really open question, but can you reflect on how your ability to like kind of, juggle the kind of creative work you do for pay, other creative work alongside motherhood has changed as your child has grown?
Yeah, my child is 16, just learning how to drive. Yes, very private. I don't really post about them or my husband. My husband has requested to be private.
Mm,
And
okay.
then I feel like children should have autonomy over their
Hmm.
own image and their own. I don't begrudge anybody who shares their children online. That's totally their thing. But I just felt like, and this is pre AI, like now I would be even more guarded. But I just felt like a child should not have to face down a picture of themselves at 2 in their first job interview unless they wanted that picture to be online. So I've been very private about them from the beginning. Um, and they're pretty private themselves. Like they have an Instagram account, but they don't really post that much. Like
Hmm.
they're kind of off the radar in a way that I find interesting and smart, but
Hmm.
interesting.
Yeah, and maybe a bit unusual for a teenager.
I think
Yeah.
unusual for a teenager. I think it's also where they go to school. Most of their friends are also that way.
Hmm.
I think it is also kind of a generational shift. I think like they're Gen Z, right? I think part of Gen Z is like always online and like really into this weird meme culture. And then part of Gen Z is really like, we've seen what all of that does. So they're in the part of the
Yeah, totally,
segment
totally.
of
Yeah.
that
A little
generation.
critical. Like I think a little bit more critical. Like there's kind of a critique happening I think you should
Yes. So
kind of
they're
have
in that
passion.
segment. I do really
Hmm.
feel like also the students that I have are like that too. You can see the ones that are like very online and very into it, and then the ones that are like,
Hmm.
So I see that divide. Okay, then how have things changed?
Yeah. So,
Um,
16 years of, of parenthood.
yeah, I mean, the beginning is the roughest. Like it's almost like I think we all parents like you close your brain off to the incredible hardship of that beginning time. I think it's just biological. I mean, I didn't want to have another child, but I don't think there's any way to have another child if you live like if you are immersed in what that beginning period is like. It is
Yeah.
so hard.
If you don't forget a little bit.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
hard. And my child came 6 weeks early. So I had 6 extra weeks of 2 hour feedings and
Wow.
like some time in the NICU and just really stressful beginning. So the beginning is really, really, really hard. And I don't say that to dissuade anyone. I really feel like if people want to have children, they should have children. I think having a child while trying to be creative is like another layer of difficulty. Just like being a creative is not like any other job on the planet. So, in that professional practice class, I'd be like, you have to be your own marketer and your own tax person and your own, like all these things, unless you can afford to pay somebody. And in the beginning, you can't afford to pay anyone. So good luck. Like you
Hmm.
really have to have 27 hats and you have to wear them all relatively well in order to get anything done. So motherhood just became like another additional 5 hats that got on top
Hmm.
of the 27 hats that you had to wear. Yeah, I stopped procrastinating. As I said, like procrastination was no longer an option. So I became uber disciplined. And, in the beginning, they would only nap while they were on me. So I did a lot of like typing and emailing while they were napping on my
Hmm.
person. Like you figure it out. Like I made some prints, like I made GoGo prints like over the span of three
Oh,
days
wow.
while
Yeah.
they were napping on me. And, like I would be
Like in a
printing them.
carrier or
Yeah.
something? Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they were always, I mean, I was lucky. They only wanted to nap on me until about 7 months. And they finally went to daycare, and daycare taught them how to sleep in a crib, which was
Hmm.
thank you, daycare. Um, but if they were with me, like sitting on my lap or on me, they were fine. So they were like a
Hmm.
super, pretty quiet, easily engaged child. So in that sense, I was super lucky. Like I remember I went to lunch with some friends and we spent like an hour and a half at lunch, and they were like, "We can't believe your baby's fine." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, as long as they're on my lap, or then it's fine. Like I can
Yeah.
give them toys, or it's when they're not with me it's a problem, which is exhausting in its own way, but in some ways
Yeah.
it made some things easier. So I mean, I really feel like it depends on what kind of child you have, and you never
Hmm.
know. The whole nature nurture thing, like, yes, there's a nurture component, but nature is strong and you cannot overpower it. Your child is going to come out a certain way, and that is your child, and you cannot do anything about it. Like, you have to adapt to that or die,
Yeah. So
basically.
true. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't, that's one of the things that people told me. And I was like, yeah, sure. And then it was like, yeah, no, okay. Like, I
Yeah.
can't change this behavior.
It's
I
so
can't do anything
true.
about that. I think if you fight it, you're in for a world of hurt, right?
Hmm.
Like, again, my child, as long as they are a planner, they're still a planner. If we go on vacation, they're packed like 2 weeks before we go, if not sooner. Like, if they know the agenda, if they know what's happening, everything's cool. If they don't know the agenda and a surprise is thrown in there, it's not cool. So it would be like, wake up from nap. Okay, we're going to go to the store, and then we're going to go to the park, and then we're going to come home, and I'll make dinner, and you can hang out in the kitchen. Or if you want to watch Yo Gabba Gabba, you can watch Yo Gabba Gabba, whatever. It was just a constant narrative of what we were going to
Hmm.
do. And then they
Hmm.
were fine. The
Hmm.
second I threw in a loop, like, oh, we're going to do this, and I didn't tell them about it, that's
Hmm.
when a meltdown would happen, or like, oh, I couldn't get that done because, I don't want to be in this store. Like, okay,
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think the
Totally.
sooner you just kind of figure out, and it's hard because you have your personality and they have their personality and they might not be exactly the same, but the sooner you can figure out how to like juggle that and make both people happy, the less stress there will be in your parenting
Yeah,
life.
totally. Yeah. The sooner you can achieve that harmony, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess I'm wondering, like, it sounds like you found some strategies to get work done when they were little, but you sort of have the benefit now of being able to look back. I mean, your kid is still a kid, right? They're still home, but they're
Yeah, but they
older,
don't need
right?
me. Like I can
Yeah. I mean,
go.
it is really different, right? Like having a
Yeah.
teenager.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
and it's been different for many years now.
like, what?
Like,
Yeah. Did you have any moments where you were worried, that you wouldn't be able to sustain things or I mean, it seems like like I said, you were able to find some strategies pretty early on. But I think when I talk to parents of younger children, and I remember when my kids were younger, feeling almost like it was an existential thing. Like, am I ever gonna, and I think this isn't just about art, right? This is about so many things that change when
yes.
you become a parent. But,
Yes.
I guess it's kind of like having the benefit of having an older child and being able to look back, like, what would you tell your younger self,
That it will be very different very soon. And people told me that. But the beginning is the hardest. Like once they get to school, it's way easier. And then once like fifth grade, once middle school happens, it becomes even easier again, other than the like having to drive them around.
Right. Totally. Yeah.
But like the time factor, like having your own time and being able to navigate things it just becomes easier as they get older, like easier, 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 even still. Although I feel like kids today don't hang out as much as I used to hang out. Like
with each other, like with their
with
friends.
each other,
Yeah.
like out doing things. I'm always like, don't you want to do things? Like, no, it's fine, or like, yeah, I want to do something. I'm bored, but it's not necessarily with friends. They're like happy to do things with me, which is nice, but also just different from
totally
how I grew up. Yeah, I think like if anything, having a kid really makes you decide if all of this stuff is important or not important. Because again, it's way easier to not do it than it is to do it. It's like nobody's knocking down my door like, hey, will you make some art for me? Like nobody cares.
This art project is due, right? In 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a group of like 20 people giving you feedback. Yeah, that doesn't
cares.
happen as easily. Yeah.
No. Yeah. Nobody cares. I mean, like, I have deadlines, but they're also like, it's like self-inflicted deadlines, not somebody knocking down my door. Really.
Yeah. And I would imagine with like shows, books, things like that, you've worked really hard to get to a place where you have those opportunities and those deadlines to meet. Yeah.
Yes.
Nobody's really been like nobody's banging down your door per se with those.
Yeah. I mean, occasionally that happens and I'm always like, wow, that's nice, but it's definitely not the norm. I mean, you have to decide if it's important. And then if it is important, you have to figure out the way to carve out the time. And again, I feel like that looks different for everybody. So are you like me and you carry your kid while you're go-go printing at the dining room table? I used to find it really hard. Like people would be like, oh, just have them nap in the studio. Like I couldn't do that. And they weren't like that. They needed to nap in their crib. So oftentimes I would just use the nap time to do admin work or some housework. I got the best work done when they were under someone else's care. So either they were at daycare or they were with my parents, or my husband was watching them for a little bit, like if it was their day off or whatever, and then I could get the work done. I had a really hard time, except for when they were really little and I was like carrying them, doing stuff with them in the room. Sometimes I could pull them into a project. Like one of the early chroma pieces I did, I had to sort things by color and they were super interested in that. So we taped garbage bags to the wall and I was like, okay, put green things in the green bag and red things. Cool. And so I made them make the labels and like, then they helped me sort stuff out. So sometimes I could do that. I need uninterrupted time to make my work. Like I can sometimes do it in chunks, but I have to plan those chunks out. Like, okay, I have an hour. I can do this in an hour. Like, let's do this. But in order to really like make the work, I need like several hours of like, yeah, I don't have to pick anybody up. I don't have to make a snack for anybody. I don't have to answer the phone. Like I need that in order to really get the work done. So I think also just knowing what kind of person you are and like, cause I know some people who they have a box and like they sit with their kid and they make work and the kid is playing with blocks and everything's kosher. Like that didn't work for me, but it works for other people. So I think figuring out your rhythm and their rhythm is really important.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and I think this, and just to kind of like close the loop on the sort of the privacy it seems like for you, keeping things separate and respecting the privacy of your kid and your partner is very much a personal choice. But I am wondering how you think about the shift over the.
Yes. I mean, I think on the one hand, it's really important to see things, representation matters. Like that's the phrase that has been bandied about for many years now. And it's true. And I think that on the one hand, it is really important for artists to see artists with children. And that's why I wasn't completely private. Like I talked about it when I had a kid, like
totally.
I blogged about it a lot. There are moments even, in my public Instagram where I showed their hands or talked about having a child. So it's not a secret. I think the normalization of just, because it used to be, how can you be a parent and be an artist? Like, I think that used to be an existential question that was asked all the time. And I think now it's kind of like, well, that's stupid. Like the question is stupid. The question should be like, do you want to be a parent?
Mm-hmm, totally. Yeah.
And then if you do, then how do you navigate being an artist and a parent? Not like, oh, it's just an overall bad idea. Cause I do think that was the sentiment for a very long time, especially, for women artists, cause it was already hard enough to be a woman artist. So how are you supposed to be a woman? Like, I think like, if you think about the artists that get recognition pre 2000s and all the white men, and they all had wives. And if they had wives and kids, it was because the wives were taking care of everything. It's like, yeah, I need a wife.
Yeah, totally.
What are you talking about?
I need a full-time caretaker. Yeah. Okay, so let's. I just have two more questions. So
Yeah.
I do want to talk about your books. And this is a good, it's kind of related to parenting. So I know you've published 6 books. Is that right? And you have another coming out next year.
I don't know how many it is.
Yeah,
whatever it is.
I'll correct it. I'll get my fact checker on it. And you've described kind of, I think, really well. You've been very generous with kind of sharing like how those books came about. Again, I mean, I think it's always a mystery. It's always been a mystery to me. Like, how did that author get published? And I'll link to a couple of those in the show notes. And but I know that like you're kind of speaking of like being private about the people that are your child and your husband, but sharing that you have a family. I love that your daughter's art is in the Crayola visual biography.
Yeah.
That was really charming. And then I know before it kind of piqued I forget which interview it was, but before you worked on your watercolor workbook, A Field Guide to Color, that you actually approached the publisher with an idea for a book of essays by artists, about navigating parenthood. So it's like, even though, to kind of the last thing we were talking about, like there's so much more now, but I feel like there's still a lot of room for growth there. So I'm curious, and of course I think you should write that book. I also feel like there's a book in the professional practices. So anyway, I hope you're working on those too, but have you made have you revisited that idea or have you?
I mean, I think the book that I originally pitched should still be made. I think that there would be an audience for artists' parents.
Yeah,
I think,
like essays.
Yeah. And
Totally.
I still think it should be a series of a lot of essays from a lot of people at different points in their career, both men and women.
Totally.
Because I think there's been like the woman angle. Like I've seen a couple books about motherhood and parenting as a creative person, but I feel like it needs all the voices. So yeah, if there's somebody out there who wants me to edit that book and put it together, just get in touch because I'm still ready to do that. I don't know who to pitch that to. So no, I am not writing that book. And the reason why it didn't get written was because the editor who I was speaking to was like, I think you should just write a book on that. And I was like, I don't want to write 10 chapters. I don't have it in me to do that, to organize all the thoughts around that. And also I felt like that was too narrow. Like the idea was to have a lot of voices, kind of like your podcast, to have a lot of voices so that you could pick and choose what was relevant to you, not me telling you what was relevant to me. And then good luck figuring out if that's relevant to you. It just felt really like, oh, that's too me centered.
Yeah. And maybe also a bit academic. Like I could see a lot of like research and data going into something like that, which is interesting, but yeah, it's so I love the idea. So if, any publisher is listening.
Yeah. Anybody listening, we can do it together. We can
there you go.
write this book together. So this book, somebody approached me again. So this is a book. It's called Art, Craft, and Color. It's a book of 20 projects. So I pulled in 20 artists and crafters. I wrote an essay about art and craft because I've been talking about it since I started that blog in the early 2000s. Like, what is art? What is craft? What's the difference? Why is there a difference? Why do we care? Like, what's the hierarchy about? And then it's an essay on color, kind of, mostly just about like why we like things in color order. How I do the chroma project with my friend that's all about being in color order. And then 20 projects by 20 people in 20 different colors. So yeah, I'm super excited about it. It was hard to write those essays, but worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Really fun to project manage the 20 people. These are all people I really admire and like their work. And there's a lot of diversity, both in material and in maker, which was
Mm-hmm.
really important. So just kind of balancing all of that was really great. I think there's going to be stuff in it that like people who don't do a lot of art and craft will find enjoyable, and stuff that is much like higher level and like might be a challenge. And yeah, this was a book that came to me. The editor, Bridget Watson Payne, used to work for Chronicle, and she and I had talked for quite some time about maybe doing a project together. And then she had pitched this idea as a book to Hardy Grant, the publisher, and with kind of me in mind, because she knew that I had talked about art and craft for
Mm-hmm.
decades now.
Mm-hmm.
And so then she was like, "Would you want to do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I would totally want to do
Nice,
that."
nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so one last question. I
Yeah.
know, and this is again a good, you just mentioned your chroma installation, kind of ongoing project with another artist, Christine Buckton Tillman. You just finished was it a month-long residency in Japan?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then here in the Bay Area, you've done, many residencies, a couple of places that, kind of sadly no longer exist, like Irving Street Projects
Yeah.
and Little Paper Planes, but also at Kala. I talked to
Yeah.
Ellen Lake
Oh, yeah.
as well for this. So some nice synergies and
Yeah.
crossovers and
Ellen's great.
a
She
lot of
also went
local
to
folks.
Mills. We have Mills in
Yeah,
common.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So I'm, for my final question, just curious how you feel about the creative kind of community, the creative health of the Bay Area now.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like every creative community at this moment in time is somewhat in peril just because of funding issues and political climate issues. And it's never been easy. So I don't really want to say that it's harder now than it's ever been. I don't
Hmm.
think that's true. In the United States in particular, I feel like there's just not an overarching support for anyone doing things creative. They're just, the infrastructure doesn't exist in the same way that it does, I think, in other cultures. But at the same time, I feel like the Bay Area is still really resilient. I think that there's always things to complain about and things can always be better. But one of the things that I love about the Bay Area is its community, and that people are really friendly and community forward.
Hmm.
I love New York, but when you go to New York, everybody is really out for themselves, and it's kind of a different feeling. I know communities exist within that, and I've been in them, and it's lovely, but it doesn't. The Bay Area just has this feeling of kind of being open.
Hmm.
I think part of it is that in some ways it's still really provincial. So, we don't necessarily have the most robust gallery scene, but we have a pretty good nonprofit scene.
Hmm.
Things are always in fluctuation and changing. I love it here in some ways. Like, I still get frustrated. It's not like I have rose glasses on, but I can't imagine building the life that I have anywhere else. Like, I feel really fortunate. The artists that I know here are super smart, super invested, working really hard, making interesting work. And I mean, maybe it's just my unfamiliarity with other art scenes, but I'm happy to be here. And I think that there's always an undercurrent of encouragement, which I don't feel in other places in the same way.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, yeah, definitely. And on that note of, just generosity, I just thank you so much for agreeing to be on the podcast. It's been so awesome to talk with you.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
I'm always down to talk about any of this
Yeah,
stuff.
awesome. Yeah, and I know, and I feel like we just sort of scratched the surface of like parenthood, but obviously wanted to talk a lot about your work and what you've got going on as an artist outside of that as well. So
Thanks.
yeah,
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Artists in Offices is produced and edited by me, Rebecca Bird Grigsby. Intro music is provided by Jesse Kelsey. Show notes and additional episodes can be found at artistinoffices.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast on your streaming platform of choice and leave the show a rating or review. This will help the podcast connect with even more artists in offices. Thank you so much for listening.
I'm not a blue chip, super famous artist where everybody's like, please come work with us. I don't even, I have no idea what that feels like.